Hello, my name is Alexander and I'm from Serbia, from University of Niš, and my topic today is on the role of nonverbal behavior in influence and persuasion settings. Let me start by saying some obvious things. Nonverbal communication, we know, is usually more dominant than verbal communication and verbal content, and when the two oppose each other, when there's a big difference between what people say and do, people usually or observers usually trust the nonverbal content. Now the influence of nonverbal behavior is very large, that it can impact people's perceptions of others, but also nonverbal cues can be used to enhance credibility. This will lead us to conclusion that nonverbal communication can be very persuasive, and this is the topic of today's presentation. Now, there are several potential motivations for why would you use these behavioral tactics. So, for example, one of the potential motivation is to create favorable impressions in others. Now, this can be used for a variety of ways. People have their own motivations for why they want to achieve to appear in a certain way and create a certain favorable impression. The next thing is encouraging openness and disclosure in any types of scenarios, specifically interview scenarios where the informational disclosure is quite important. So in these scenarios, we can use strategically nonverbal communication to encourage openness and disclosure. Next is, of course, rapport building, which is one of the most crucial steps in any interaction. And of course, compliance gaining, or making someone more compliant to our request. Some of the most important questions to consider when starting is, what behavioral outcomes do we want? We should explicitly state what behavioral change we're looking for. This will lead us to the next question: is how can I improve my nonverbal communication to appear more persuasive? And this is when certain tactics come into play. And what's very important is how can others benefit from our presentation, because we're looking for mutual interest and not just our own benefits. The most crucial step, like I said, in any interaction is rapport building, and it's been shown that nonverbal communication impacts rapport building a lot. Rapport building helps to create a mutual bond between interviewer and interviewee, and to create a connection, and in certain interview settings it can encourage openness. Some of the nonverbal indicators of rapport are smiling and eyebrow flashes. I think practitioners should be especially encouraged to use eyebrow flashes in the first few seconds of interaction, because this eyebrow flash behavior is usually mirrored by other party. Forward leans. Forward leans in therapeutic settings, for example, are frequent in those scenarios when rapport building is very high. So I think forward leans are a very crucial step. Also, mirroring of body language, eye contact, mutual eye contact, back channel responses, those are some of the listener responses, and of course the use of touch. Now, this is only some of the nonverbal indicators of rapport, and they can intentionally be used in order to create a desirable outcome or to enhance rapport or to make rapport more quicker. Now, in any scenario, your level of attractiveness will have a great impact on later accomplishments. Now, when I say attractiveness, I mean dressing styles, hygiene levels, and things like that. Now, I'm not going to go into different experiments, but usually they show that attractive people are seen as more persuasive. Therefore, you should ask yourself, how can you apply these characteristics in order to make people more compliant, or how can you increase your attractiveness in order to make people someone more compliant. Now, the other characteristic which I think is quite useful is similarity. Um, Attitude similarity, knowledge similarity, and things like that. Now, again, I would encourage practitioners to consider what can they do in a specific scenario to increase similarity with other person. This might require you to research that person before you interact. So, for example, consider what types of clothing they might use. It's been shown that you will be more successful, you'll be more persuasive if you wear similar clothes with the target. Now we come to specific behavioral techniques practitioners can use on the field in order to create desirable behavioral changes. Now there are numerous techniques that I could list, but I only listed some of them which I think are the most important. But what's good to consider is that when we apply a specific technique, our goal is to create more attractiveness, to create more similarity between ourselves and the other person, and also to increase affinity and liking. Of course, this will all lead to more compliance. So application of a specific technique might make someone more readily to fulfill our request. The first technique I want to talk about is prolonged eye gaze. It's been shown in numerous studies that if a stranger asks a person to do something, they will be more successful if they look them directly in the eye. This makes, when you look someone directly in the eye for a longer period of time, will create more awareness and more focus, which is what we want. So practitioners should be encouraged to use prolonged eye gaze when they want to become more persuasive. Next one is the use of touch, which I think is less frequent. So for example, waitresses who touch their customer's shoulder later on receive more tips. So touching someone right after or before you ask them to do something, you will instantly increase your chances that someone will fulfill your request. And the final one which I mentioned is intentional mimicry. which is essentially that in the first few minutes of interaction, you should try to mimic people's behavior, and of course, this will create more rapport, but also make yourself more persuasive. So my presentation today was about the potential use of nonverbal communication in influence settings, and I've listed various different ways of creating rapport, some of the techniques and tactics you can use to appear more persuasive. But again, I mentioned, but what's very important to consider is that we're looking for mutual benefits and not just our benefits. So I think practitioners should be encouraged to pay attention to their nonverbal presentation, their attractiveness levels, and things like that. Thank you very much.